Hello there. Welcome to tonight's webinar with Classpad.net, where we're going to be overviewing the settings. So this is the third in a series. I'm Karen Greenhouse, currently an adjunct professor at Drexel University. I teach in their Math Masters program, helping math teachers become better math teachers and getting their masters. And I also work for Casio as their spokesperson, which means I go to conferences and work with teachers, and so I am very familiar with Classpad because I use it a lot. And joining me is Amy Chow, and I will let Amy introduce herself.
Good evening. Thank you guys for coming. I am the Training and Product Manager for Casio's Education Department. I've been doing that for almost 10 years. And before that, I was a high school mathematics teacher. Before Karen gets started, I just wanted to remind everyone that for the sake of audio quality, we've automatically muted everyone. If you do have a question, there is a section, a chat portion. So right now, if you're hovering over with your mouse over the screen that Karen has up, you'll see that there's a chat option kind of at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that, that'll open up the chat panel. It's probably a good idea to go ahead and have that open. That way you can see everyone's chats. You guys can say hi to each other and then ask questions there to everyone or just to me specifically if you want. And then if there's any question that I kind of see popping up consistently or frequently, I will kind of jump in and have Karen answer that to the entire group. So other than that, Karen, take it away.
Okay, so hopefully you've joined us for the last two webinars, and this is the third in an overview series. So the first one we went through what is Classpad, how to set up an account, and then the second one we walked through how to find activities, how to save activities, how to share activities. So if you missed those two, make sure that you check on our website. Those are recorded and they're available for on-demand viewing at any point. So this is the third one in the series, and we thought that we would spend some time looking at all the icons within Classpad.net, when you're creating activities, and the settings, because you can really control a lot of what you do and what students will see by changing the settings. So that's what we're doing today. Just a reminder, I'm going to switch my screen now to the website. So Amy, let me know, can you see that yet? Oops, I think I have to hit share there. There we go. So hopefully, can everyone see?
We're good.
All right. So this is the landing page for Classpad.net. If you don't have an account, I am going to just remind you again, it's pretty easy to set up. Just scroll down from this landing page and click right here, create an account, and follow the steps. And the reason you want an account is so that you can save any work that you do or any papers that you find that you would like to use in your own work with your students, whatever, you want to be able to duplicate it. So creating an account allows you to save things that you find or that you're working on. So once you have an account, you're going to log in, and I'm going to go right to my account right now, and just takes a little while for, there we go. So I'm going to just log into my account. So notice you can do Google or Microsoft too, just connected. So this is what Classpad looks like on a blank page. If I wanted to go find my other papers, once I'm in my account, I have this, it's automatically saving everything I do, and all my work that I've done previously is back here in my paper management. So what we're going to focus on is, let's say you're in a paper. So this is what we call everything. Here's my paper, and I'm ready to work, and I want to make sure I set up my settings. So this is the overall paper, and anytime you see three dots throughout all the functionality, it always means that there's something else. So I'm going to click the three dots here. So notice it's at the top of the paper. So all of this pertains to this entire document. So I can set my math settings up before I even do any work if I want to do that, or I can come back to this at any time, and it changes the math settings throughout the paper so that I don't have to do it within individual stickies. So if I click math settings, here's the things you can change. You can change how your numbers appear. So you could add scroll down scientific notation, how many decimal places you want. I tend to like at least one decimal place. I'm going to change to that. How you want your angles to appear, radians, degrees. And Amy, what is grad? Gradient. Is that what it is? Gradient?
It's actually just grad.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've never used that, so I don't go there. And notice that you can turn on or off complex. So those of you who are working with complex numbers, if you're trying to do that in the calculator and it's not working, it's because complex is not turned on. In fact, let me just give an example of that. So those of you here for the first time, just a quick note, here's all the functions, all the things you can do mathematically in Classpad. You can calculate, you can graph, you can do geometry, you can do data, statistics, statistical testing, things like that. You can do sequences, financial, and then you can also write text. So we're going to be going through all of these, just the settings. But let me get into calculate. Let's say I am working with complex numbers, and let's say I want to try and find the square root. I'm just going to do one I know that's going to fail, of -9. So watch what happens. I try to do that, and it's obviously gets an error message because this is not a real result. And so if you're working in complex numbers and you're getting these messages, it means complex has not been turned on. So you would want to go to your math settings and turn on complex format. And so now I'm going to go back to this problem just to show you the difference. And now you'll see that I have an answer because I have the complex mode on. Okay, so that's what that means. I'm going to go back and turn that off because we really don't actually need it. But anyway, you can change how your answers appear. So you can have decimal answers all the time, never the standard, or you can do standard where you can toggle back and forth. Notice my answers here, I can toggle back and forth, but if I just turn one or the other on, it will only do that one for all my answers. So that's another setting you can change. Let's go back to math again. So
Karen, can I go back and clarify?
Absolutely.
Sorry. Angle, that grad is actually gradient. You're right. I apologize.
Okay.
I went and double checked. Wanted to make sure we said everything correctly.
We said it right.
So,
all right.
Yes, so it is gradient.
We learn something new every day too.
Yes.
And so all of these things can be changed. So you can change your variables to be real, on or off. You can turn on this data when you're doing the one variable statistics to find Q and Q1 and Q3. I thought that was automatic, but we'll say okay. So there's the math settings, and this then impacts everything in the paper automatically up front, but it doesn't prevent you from changing the settings within each sticky too. So it's kind of a broad category here, but this is the overall settings. Financial settings. This is nice. We have a financial sticky. And if you want to set things up ahead of time, because the financial sticky, and I'll show you that in just a second, is templates. So it's a template for each, like for finding compound interest, things like that. Each template has settings, and you can do the settings ahead of time before you even get into the templates. So whichever templates use days of the year, you can have that set up ahead of time. So 360 or 365. I'm not sure where 360 is coming from, but 365 is probably the default. So these are all the defaults, but you can change, like if you're working with any templates that have to do with payment, you can have it at the beginning or the end. So you can have compound or simple, things like this. So this is where financial, this is overall setting all of the settings up. But then if I were to actually go into financial, so here's my financial sticky. And if I look up here at the 3 dots, remember it's always 3 dots, the only thing I can change right now is color. But once you go into one of these financial templates, so let's say we want compound interest, it also has 3 dots, and now here's the 2 settings that pertain to this particular template, and I can change them. So for financial, you can either do it by template, one at a time, or if you go to the overall paper, you can do it all at once. So that's sort of up to you, however you're working with that. If you're not sure until you get into the template what you want, then you would just do it within the template. So again, anytime you're in a sticky, it's the 3 dots will tell you settings that you're allowed to change. Okay. Back over here to overall paper settings. Variable manager. Now that's really just to see what variables you have defined. We haven't defined any variables, so therefore we don't have any. But if I were to define, let's say in sticky, I defined f of x. Was that, or maybe, I'm trying to think, Amy, is that going to give me a?
Just define just a single variable. So for example, equals
20. All right. So let's say I've decided A is 20. So anytime I use A, then it's going to have that value of 20.
No, you need to use the colon equals.
My fault. I always forget that.
Yes.
So one thing, this is probably a nice thing to bring up. I want to define A to always be equal to a specific value. If I use equal, it's equal to 20 at that time. But if you notice down here in our keyboard, you've got an equal sign, and then you have this colon equals. That's how you define. You need to use colon equals. So we'll show you the difference here. So here it's telling me that A is now 20 anytime I use it. So notice I used it here 3 times. A makes 60. If I did A plus 30 plus 2A, it's always going to be used as a value 20 unless I change it. So I have defined a variable, and I can define many variables within my paper. So now when I go to the variable manager, it's telling me what I have used as a variable. So A I've used, and it's an expression. Okay, so that's what the variable manager is. You can't really change anything in here. It's just giving you the information. So that's what that is in the settings.
Karen, there are 3 dots in there. Can you click on that?
In where?
On the variable manager.
Oh.
So this is where you can actually, if you wanted to go back through and delete all the variables or anything that's been defined. This is kind of a shortcut way to reset the paper.
You still can't change them, but if you wanted to,
yeah.
and why would you do this? Well, let's say you want to use A again, but in a different situation, you would delete it first so that you can reuse that variable. So that would be the main purpose. We're hoping at some point that you can actually change the values, but we're not quite there yet. So that's down the line. And I already talked about description and tags. These have to do with, what's this paper about? Tags are giving it keyword phrases if you're going to share it. Paper language, we still haven't figured out what that one is, but you can change your language to English and stuff like that. Share, this was all done in the last webinar if you want to look at what we did with that. If you want to make your paper a favorite, you just put a star to it. So mainly the ones that we're talking about on setting are these first 3, and these pertain to the overall paper. What I want to do now, and I've already sort of done that, so let's talk about our icons. I've already talked about financial, so I'm not going to do that one again. So now I'm just going to do them in order, starting with calculate. So we've already actually talked a little bit about calculate. You can't change anything in calculate except the color. So anything you want to change in calculate, like the number of decimals that show up, that's done in the overall math settings here. Okay, so calculate, you have to change that within the overall paper settings. If we go down, I'm going to scroll down here in my paper just to get more room. If we go into graph, again, 3 dots, you'll see several things that you can do. You can change the color. Not many options there, but you can change the color. But here's where you can turn off the axes. So notice what happened to my grid. Or you can turn them back on. And when they're on, that's when you can choose to either have numbers or not have numbers. You can have the grid or not have the grid. So this is where you're changing how it looks on the graph sticky. If you don't want the X and Y labeled, you can turn those off. You can also type in actual words, so labels that describe what you're actually measuring. And so when you do that, just so you can see, here's where they kind of show up. It's kind of a light gray, but I've changed my labels there. So other things you can do in the graph settings, you can change the window, so the scale. So there's a couple ways to do the scale. You can do it here manually. So let's say I want to see 10, negative 10 to 10, and let's do 2 to 2. See, there's a lot of, you can do this manually as you would normally, and it will then change the grid, right? Or you can also zoom in and out using your mouse, and move your graph this way with your mouse. So that's all done with the mouse. But settings allows you to do things manually. Over here, when you're working with inequalities, let me actually show you what that looks like. So let's just do some inequalities here. Y equals 2x. And let's do y is, notice when we did the greater than, that it automatically puts in that dotted line, which is nice. And then let's do 3 plus 1. All right, so this is a this is the two graphs together. So notice the inequalities and a couple other things. So notice solid line when I have equal, and so solid points, but when it's not equal, it has the open point, which is kind of cool. But notice the way that it's graphed right now, it's the union of the two of them. So not just their intersection part, which kind of, I didn't do a very nice graph, did I? Let me change it so we can see it a little bit better. That's not much better. But notice when they overlap, it's a different color. So blue represents this first one, red represents this second one, and then they're overlapping, their intersection is purple. So the graph automatically, if you go back to settings, is doing union. But if you just want to see the intersection, you can change that in the setting. And so now see the difference. I only see the points where they have points in common. So that's one of the settings that you can change in a graph when you're dealing with inequalities. And so for coordinates, you can do standard or decimal. So standard means, let's go back. This is a standard coordinate. So you'll see that it is in its rational number form, standard form. But if I don't want to see that and I want to just be in decimal, then that's what it's going to look like. So you can choose which form you want, depending, I guess, on what you're dealing with your students. And here you can change. So notice, because I did my math settings overall paper to 2 decimal places, it's not letting me, oh, well, no, it's not letting me do that because I'm not in decimal. I can change here, even though my paper overall was fixed to 1, I can change, or fixed to 2, I can change it in my graphing sticky to whatever it is I want. So maybe I only want to tenths. And so that it will allow me to do that. And then here you can turn on all these things here too. And Amy, a little more G-solve.
So if you click conics, if you were to graph, for example, like a quadratic, and you select the conics icon, it would actually give you some of the conic features, so like the eccentricity and then some other things like that. So when you select the graph itself.
Oh, I see.
So it gives you, yeah, so it gives you not just what you would want to have in, you know, what the features that you would find, right, in a normal quadratic. It would give you the conics, conic section options.
So that's
as well.
only if I have this on. So if I turn this off, notice that that now goes away, and the only thing I'm seeing are the key points there.
Correct.
So these are all the graph settings, and for every, so if let's say I have this graph set up the way I want, but then I open a second graph sticky to do a different graph, notice my settings are back to the standard or the default. So everything I do in this one that I change the setting is going to have these settings, but if I open a new one, I have to set it up again. So, but remember, you can graph many things on one and then pull them apart, and then the settings will go with the graph if they start, if that makes sense. Did I make sense there, Amy?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. So, all right, so that's the graph setting. So let's go into geometry. And geometry, again, also has quite a few settings. So because there's so many things you can do with geometry. So it's the 3 points. So we're going to click it. And so here we color, but this to me is really exciting. You have lots of different grid options. So right now, none of the grids are on. So notice that I can either turn the grid on or off. So geometry starts off with no grid. But let's say you want a grid, and if I click that grid and I say okay, there's the basic grid, right? But I can make it look very much like the graph up here by turning on axes, numbering them, and labeling them X. So this section right here is pretty identical to what was in the graph section. I can manually change the domain and range by hand or zooming in and out. But so now it looks, you know, similar to this. But if I turn off, let's turn off the axes. One thing that's different in geometry does not occur in the graphing is when I make changes, I have to remember to hit OK, or they won't stick. And this is only in the geometry sticky. But I want to show you the other grid. So I'm going to show you, this is our dot grid. And this is great, you know, geo boards, or if you want to just make, you know, pretty basic shapes using a grid, you know, squares. And one thing about the grids, once you have these grids on, in geometry, you can't do this in the graphing sticky, but in geometry, you can have it snap. So that means whenever you move a point on the grid, it'll snap to a nice even intersection, I guess, or fixed. So I'm going to show you what that does. So here, I just turned on snap, and so watch what happens. I can only move this to other points because it's being snapped to it. And that's really nice, especially when you're working with, so if I always wanted this to maintain, you know, that distance, or if I was working with squares or something like that, this would be a nice feature to be able to snap to the grid. So geometry has a lot of grid options. I want to show you what the diagonal looks like. This is great isometric. No, am I saying that right? Isometric grid.
Yes,
that's what this
isometric.
is. And so this is fantastic if you wanted to do, you know, like a 3D visual. I could make it look like a, you know, a cube. So isometric's really nice for things like 3D. Whoops. There we go. I did a bad job there. There we go. So lots of different grid options in geometry. Changing the range and domain you can do by hand. You can decide how you want your units to display, if you want them to be millimeters, centimeters, meters. This isn't actually changing the measures. So if it said 5 for the length of something, it's still going to be 5, but if you want it to show up as 5 millimeters, then that's all that's doing, is adding a label so students can be doing things like that, comparing. And angle, again, you can choose how you want, degree, radians, or gradient. You can turn labeling on or off. So if you notice when I was drawing these, the labels were automatically coming on. If you don't want that to happen, you just want them working with shapes, you would turn that off. Hidden objects. So one of the things in geometry, and when we get into a webinar where we're going to actually go more into this, when you're working with geometry and say you're doing constructions and you've made something that a circle was used to help you construct it, but you don't want the circle anymore, you can hide the circle. And this setting here lets you see, it kind of lightly grays them out, the things that were hidden, so that you can see what was hidden. Why isn't something working? It's because something might have been hidden that's controlling it. So that's what this thing is to see things that have been hidden. And then again, here you can change how the coordinates and the measurements show up, whether you have no decimal points or fixed 2, 3, however you want. So all of that is the same. And then whenever you change something in geometry, the only thing to remember is you have to hit that OK. So any questions so far about settings? Basically, look for the 3 dots in any sticky you're in, and it will allow you to do the settings.
Karen, can you show them what happens when you change the color? You've been talking about it, but I don't know that you actually had it changed. So if we can just show that it's right now, the background on the sticky.
Setting.
Well, no, this one here, the color here, yeah. So right now you see that the background is kind of like it's white for each of these sticky notes. So if Karen were to change that to color, it just kind of grays it out. So it just changes the look of the background.
Yeah, it's not.
Notes. It doesn't change anything color-wise other than that. So just helping with viewing.
That's actually something we should talk about, just because it is technically a setting. So settings is for the overall grid, but notice that in graphing that my graph came up green. So this is also considered a sticky. So every time you have a new thing you can move, it's a different kind of, this is the equation sticky. And there are settings here, but you can also change the colors here. So 3 dots and here's the color, so it's green. I could make the graph be purple instead. So notice it changed. I could make it be a solid or a dashed. And I could make, and then this is something I could either show it or hide it. So this is nice if you have many, many things and you only want to show them one at a time. You can make your functions, but then hide some of them and bring them back when you want them to. So you could have like 5 functions here and have 4 of them hidden and then bring them back one at a time or something like that. So settings, and then whenever you see color, if you click on the color, in theory, it's also got some settings for changing the color or whatever, okay? And so same thing sort of in geometry. This is the settings for the graphing or the workspace. But then once you are dealing with geometry objects, so these are the geometry objects, you can also click this right thing and go to properties, and you can change things about that object. Or like I'm on the line here, I can change the style of the line, or I can add congruent marks if it's a square, those types of things. So settings 3 dots is the overall sticky, and then within each sticky, once you've added something to it, there are other places like properties where you can change color, style, add lines in. If I were to deal with a point, say in geometry, I could change the type of point that's being used. Is that clear? Do I need to clarify that again?
No, that's pretty good.
Okay.
I think everyone is on the same page.
Okay, so now let's go into data. So here's data, and this is a table. It doesn't have much going on right now, so let's just add some numbers. And so the table itself, you could change the color again. I tend to never do that, but you could change the color, just changes it to, you know, gray as we saw. But notice in statistics, whoops, when I'm on the column, so notice, here's what I'm going to do. If I don't have anything selected, all I can change is the color. But again, once I'm in the sticky and I've added something, if I click on those things and I go back to settings, I can do a couple things in statistics. And this is really nice if you're making an activity that you want students to work with specific data. You can lock the data. And that means, so I'm going to hit this lock here. And now I can't change these numbers. So if I were to have sent this and shared this activity, they can't change the numbers and change the data. So you can lock columns, you can lock as many as you want, and just to unlock them, all you have to do is go back to settings and hit the unlock. I can also, and this is nice, I can make many columns, but maybe some of the columns are for a scatter plot to show up, and I don't want the students to even know that that's where it came from. I can actually, watch what happens. I can hide that column and it no longer exists. So it was used, and of course now I don't remember how to get it back, sadly.
By clicking on B.
Ah, there you go.
Yes.
So you have to always be clicked, that's right, you just have to be clicked in the space. I keep forgetting that. But so why would you ever want to hide a column? And it's usually, like I've used this in certain activities where I've made a scatter plot, but I don't want them to know where the scatter plot came from because I don't want them to see the actual points. So I make the scatter plot from, you know, so let's just do that from these points, which are not very exciting. So let's say I make the scatter plot. How come I don't have any? Oh, because that was a silly plot, scatter plot. 2, 3, 4. I need to get the data. Yeah.
Yep.
Tell I've been doing this too long. So there we go. There's my scatter plot. So even though that's really not a very good scatter plot, let's make a different one.
Okay.
Ignore everything I'm doing. All right. So I'm going to make a scatter plot this time. And so there's my scatter plot. And so let's say I don't want the student, I want them to work with the scatter plot, but I don't want them to see what where the numbers are. I don't want them to change it. I can hide these columns and then have them maybe, what are the points, and have them record things. So it doesn't impact, they can't actually change the scatter plot in any way. So that might be a reason why you hide something, is you don't want them to mess or even see where the information came from. Maybe it's a regression that you did and you don't want them to know where that came from or what the points are for it. So that's what you can do with the statistics. Now, once you have a grid or a graph or a plot or something that you've made from your statistical information, I want you to notice that it's exactly the same as the graph that was up here, right? So all the settings that you could do here, you can now do in the statistical graph because they're really the same once you have that graph in place, if that makes sense. So any questions about statistics or data? All right,
We're good.
so the next one, we haven't done sequence yet. So sequence is, if you type in a sequence, and I wrote one down so that I wouldn't. I'm just going to make a sequence here. So when you're in sequence, I want to point out that you now have available to you in the keypad here, these other options that pop up for you. So like I want to raise this to the nth power. Well, here's that term for me. Oops, not 10. And then I want to start at, let's say, 1. Okay, so here's my sequence. I get a table. I can even plot with my sequence. So what are my settings? So I just want to point out the different options that you have. So notice I get a table that has its own settings. And so in the table, I can change the range of n, right? So the default is only 0 to 4. So I could say I want to see all the points from negative, and I'm doing this manually, I hope. I don't, well, let me, so maybe I only want to see those. I could do it as an ordered pair. I could do a arithmetic sequence, geometric, progression, difference. So there's lots of options in here once you have the table that matches your sequence up. So once you get a sticky, each sticky then has its own setting. So always remember the 3 dots to look there because there's a lot of things that you can often change. So in this sequence, I can change the range. I can change how the pairs appear. I can change the sum or not. I can change the decimal place of the coordinates if I'm using coordinates. So once I get a sticky, every sticky has its own settings that pertain to that particular situation that's going on. So again, notice this is a graph. So it looks just like the other graphs, except for this additional thing here where I can change what type. Do I want to see the sum or do I want to see each individual one? Okay. So this one also has its own settings where I can either have a recursive and I can choose which type, or I can have an explicit. Now, if I choose explicit, everything goes away. So let's see if it'll come back. No, it won't come back. Well, now, yeah, it does. All right. So just keep in mind, depending on what you're doing, when you get a new sticky, it has its own individual settings. So this is kind of the whole idea that you can arrange and set up your paper however way you want, because each sticky is basically its own unique little situation. Any questions on the sequencing or sequences?
Nope. Pretty self-explanatory.
Okay. And we already went through financial, which would have been the next one here. So I'm just going to go to text right now. And text has, basically you can change the color of the text. That's the main setting for text. But then down here are some other additional options. You can change the size of the font. So it's defaulting to 4, which is pretty big. But like, if I wanted really big, that would be really big. Or it can go really small. So you can change the font. You can't, not the font, you can change the size. You can't change the font at this point, but you can change the font, the color of the sticky. And then this is our math type. This is controlled by the math settings for the whole paper. So whatever you chose in the math settings, decimal, all that stuff would be here, appearing here. So that is basically it for settings in general. So just a broad overview of the different types of settings, and that, so the main thing to keep in mind is each sticky that you create that's on your page has settings that you can alter and adjust to fit whatever you need for that particular situation. So if there's no questions, we're going to move on to the last thing just to kind of make sure we have covered, I think, everything in these first 3 webinars. So I wanted to
sorry, we're going to go right back, sorry, to geometry, because you just pulled that back up. And if you will maybe open up a new geometry sticky, can you describe what snap and fix does again? Because right now you're on the fixed option.
Yes. Okay. So the snap and the fix are only relevant if you have a grid. So I'm just going to turn on, let's turn on a grid. So notice I turned on the grid. I'm choosing this grid type up here. I put a minor grid on, which means it's going to have smaller grids as well. And maybe let's turn on an axes. So, okay. Nope. Let's put on, well, actually, I'll show you all three of them. So this time, so if I construct something, so let's just make a shape. If I don't have snap on, so here's if I don't have snap on, as I move this, it's free to move anywhere, right? It's not controlled by anything because snap is not on. So it's not, if I want to hit exactly on 2.2, it may or may not be doing that. I mean, it looks like it is, but it may not. So when I go back in here and turn snap on, it will snap to the closest complete intersection, right? So it's not automatically going to it, but it'll snap if I'm close to one. It'll snap onto it and not leave me hanging out on a thing. If I do fixed, it forces me. It won't let me. So notice I can't even move off of a grid, a complete intersection. So snap lets me kind of be halfway between, but then it will snap to a close one. This one won't even let me move. It only lets me move from complete intersection to complete intersection. So is that a little clearer?
Yes, that helps. Thank you.
Okay. So if we're done, I'm kind of done with the overview of settings. I just wanted, before we leave, to make sure everyone knows where there's some resources built into your paper. So when you're calculating and you're trying to remember, oh, I want to find the mean of something you don't remember, the function that you need to use, you can always just start typing in a letter of what you think it is, and it'll bring up this function list. And so, oh, there's the one I wanted right there, and you can click it. But there is also a whole list of functions in just a list form for you if you want to look it up ahead of time or kind of review what they are. So if you click on the function list, it's going to open a new page for me, and you will see all the different functions that you can do with Classpad.net. So those of you who are, interested in the complex, I know we mentioned that, here's all the complex function commands that you can use in the calculate to help you find different things. So probability matrices, vectors. So that exists right here. If we go back to this page, up here in this question mark where it's help. So there is your function list. And also included in that is a user guide. So remember, we do have a YouTube site, and we'll give you the link to that in just a minute. But you can also just look things up in our user guide, and that again is a separate section, but it basically goes through each one of the sticky notes and how to do different things within the stickies. So how do you create a new paper? How do you move the sticky note? How do you copy? We covered this in our last webinar. So the user guide has a lot of information, and you'll see that it has little visuals to help you as you keep moving, and kind of quick little hints. So this is a great tool if you just like, oh, I wish I don't remember how to do this. The user guide is a great place, and you can get somewhere. Let's say we're in the geometry sticky. I can click on this, and it'll take me right to geometry. Here's all the topics in geometry that I can look at. And so I'm trying to see if they have snapping to here. But we didn't even do it. But using the protractor, it tells you exactly what to click, what it looks like, how to use it, how to change the size. So the user guide is a really helpful tool, and it's right there at the top of any page that you're working on under help. And Amy, did I forget anything? I know that
just one thing, because we went we're right next to it. The circle at the top of that screen. We talked about changing, colors for each of the sticky notes, that you can have different colors. So like what we like to do with activities is, have the directions in one color, and then, create another text sticky note with a different color for our students, to write out their answers, or, for them to jot their notes.
Yeah, or like even
Yeah.
like I know when we're creating things for Casio to share, we have all geometry activities are purple and all
Right.
activities are pink. It's just like a nice way to also contribute to your organization.
Right. And so we kind of organize those things, but you can also change that top banner there. So Karen's, selected the circle there, and then she can just change it to purple. So then really it's just the banner of the paper that's been changed. You would still have to go through, and if you opened up a sticky note, have to change the sticky note to a purple color
So
if you wanted it to match. Right. But then if you were to go into your paper setting or paper management section, the colors will kind of show up a lot easier, depending on what view you're using. So
yes, exactly.
Yep.
Great. Well, I think that is all that I have to share. Hopefully, I feel like I stumbled a lot in this webinar, but thank goodness Amy is there to help me. So if there's any other questions, let me know and I'll go over that. If not, we are going to have some future webinars. We're going to post those on our website. We're going to be focusing a little bit more, we're going to get away from the overviews and focus more on like some math content and maybe specifically working in geometry or working in the data. So look for those. They are coming up and they are free as always.
No, I think all the questions got answered.
Okay.
Either through chat or through you. So yeah, otherwise, thank you guys for joining us in this quick series on an overview of Classpad.net and some of its features. Like Karen said, we will be posting this recorded webinar on our YouTube site, so youtube.com/Classpad.net. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter to find out more on some of the upcoming webinars. Like Karen said, we'll focus on specific content a little bit more, talk about geometry, maybe focus on triangles, or, in algebra, talking about quadratic functions and solving and graphing and different things like that. So,
and I guess we could also mention some of our webinars, we're going to actually focus on our hardware, our emulator software, if you have.
Yeah.
So look for those as well. It's not just going to always be Classpad.net.
Very true. Yes. Thank you for that. So, all right.
I've
posted for joining us. Go ahead.
Is it showing, Amy? I posted the
the
links to our
yes.
And the YouTube site has a lot of videos on there how to, if you want to actually see and hear something being done. But we also post on our Facebook, when we post new activities, and same with our Twitter. So, all of those things should keep you informed of upcoming events and activities that are being updated.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time, we hope.
Yes. Thank you guys for joining.
Yeah, okay. Maybe 3 in a day is not awesome.
Yeah. I think we'll stick to 2.
Well, I actually love webinars where they're like, oops, I made a mistake. Whoops.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems very much more realistic when we're doing it.
Yes. And we're human. So at first I was like, oh, maybe we should stop and re-record. But I was like, you know what? Just keep going.
Oh, did you see the email from Nikki?
No, I turned my email off. What did she say?
Nikki said, I was able to get the log information for the YouTube. Please see below. I don't see where she's saying see below.
Oh, Nathan. In Nathan's email.
Yeah, your headset's getting worse.
So weird. Well, yours was kind of breaking up too.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah, which is weird because like you were sounding it sounds crackly.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the time of day.
Wait, where do you see? I don't see the login information.
So the YouTube access email?
Yeah.
She just sent us? Nathan, right below that.
Hello, everyone. Great news. I was able to get the login information for YouTube. Oh, okay. There it is. Okay.
I was like,
who the hell is Joe Blogger?
I don't know.
Joe Blogger at Ymail?
Ymail.
What is Ymail? How does that? So we got to see if we can change that. Like it should be changed to something where we can actually recover anything that's sent to it. So it should be changed to what? Either not Classo, but Casio, whatever the Casio.
Yeah, can you change the email?
Sometimes you can't. It depends. For YouTube, I don't know if you can for YouTube.
Yeah.
No, I don't think you can.
See, that's just going to be annoying.
All right. Hi, Amy and Karen. Please see below and know what you think. Good afternoon. I wanted to loop back on the webinar post you request for tomorrow. Chapter 2 items. All right. I'm not seeing. Oh, I see what he's saying. Join us for a free webinar series. So what's that? Are you seeing these?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess I could stop sharing and start sharing that instead. That would be so logical, Karen. It's frightening. It's frightening how logical I am. All right. So wait, what's this one for?
So I asked her to, I don't know what this one is for.
Well,
this could be what that one could be what they want us to use at the beginning.
One is a mock-up of the frame we created for the webinars. If approved, we can remove the stock image and it will be transparent. So you can broadcast the webinar with that frame on top. The second item is the hero graphic for the webinar series. We'll use post copy and create a Facebook event to expand on details. So I just want to get your thoughts on the image before I write it out. Okay. All right. So this
is what they're going to put use
the
as
within it.
I think so. But I don't know how we're going to.
That's not going to work. It's going to,
because they talk about broadcasting. So is this then that this is for like is our background now in a PowerPoint?
I don't know. Okay, so this is what I think this is. I think this is once we have the recording, they're going to put the recording behind this, and you.
That's what I think it should be. Yes.
That's how I'm interpreting this.
Okay, so
my question is this thing up here on the left going to stay while they're watching the video because it's going to totally interfere with the actual
video. Yeah. We need to. Well, maybe what we can do then is, did you already edit the first webinar we just did?
I did. I was going to post that to you.
Okay. Can you post it on?
I mean, I can put it in the shared folder I have for Hubbard.
Okay. Because I don't know that I have access to that folder.
Oh, I'll send you the link. All right. So, I mean, I don't mind this. This is fine, except this has to be way smaller.
Yeah, or that has to disappear when we start.
Or disappears
the video.
when they hit play or something.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's gonna interfere with.
I mean, that's exactly
the title
where all this
and the paper management. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's not gonna work.
And even if no matter where they put it, it's going to interfere with something.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming that's what this is. This I'm very unclear, unless.
Well, this is webinar intro. I think that's. Yeah, I think that's like going to be like when you first. I don't know.
This has nothing to do with the webinar itself. I think this has to do with. That's where it's like the opening of the page, like the page, the Classpad.net web, or the link. They click on this and it takes them to where all the webinars are listed. That's my guess.
It says it's the hero graphic for the webinar series.
So what does that mean? I don't even know what that means. All right, let's look up.
When I say hero graphic, I think that means that's like the intro.
Hero graphic.
That's how I'm interpreting it.
A hero graphic is an introductory type area of a website. So it's part of the website that generally consists of a large banner image accompanied by a minimum amount of text or a call to action. This typically is the first thing a user encounters on the home page. That's exactly what this
Okay.
is. It's,
Okay.
Here, it's like in our website where
It's
it says
like
videos.
the
Like where it
videos.
says
Yeah.
videos. It's
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm okay with both of these.
The hero graphic is fine. I'm with you. Like, I don't mind that.
Except for this little thing. So here, do you want to write or should I write what we're going to respond back?
I can write.
Okay. Well, you know what we want to say.
Yeah. I mean, I can share my screen instead.
Stop sharing. You can share now.
There you go. You can see my email.
Yes. Oh, you know what? I'm going to stop the recording because.
Oh, yeah, because it's going to be a lot to edit.
Jesus.
Yeah, stop the recording first.
Stop
and then...
the recording.